flight timeline.
It's the Bold Republic Radio Show. My name is Glenn Woods. Thanks for joining me. Pretty much everything I talk about, and and a whole lot more, you find it on my website at boldrepublic.com. And I have a guest in studio. If you're watching by video, you see him right there. So, actually, I'm going to say close the door behind you because it's doing something kind of funny with the light and people can't see your face. Normally on Thursdays, we have, that changed it right away. It made everything a whole lot darker. Hang on a second here. Let me just go ahead. You're going to have a big bright light in your face.
I recently asked a guy riding with me which one was my good side. He said
there is none. Just get rid of it.
So it doesn't matter.
Usually I have Wyoming Liberty Group on with me, but you work with Wyoming Liberty Group.
I believe I work for a wing of Wyoming Liberty Group.
Yeah, one of the affiliates. Yes. Okay, so state the name and occupation then.
I am a contract writer for Republic Free Choice.
Okay.
Which is some different 501 type corporation from the Wyoming Liberty Group.
Okay, and what exactly does Republic of Free Choice do? What's the purpose?
Similar issue, sort of a think tank with an emphasis towards education.
Okay.
Of the population.
All
I
right.
am registered currently, I believe, as a lobbyist. Either that or it's just expired and I need to re-up.
Yeah, you need to, kind of like your driver's license. Probably need
very
to
similar to that.
Okay.
I don't need to submit a picture.
And you specifically focus on what? Juvenile justice, you said.
I specifically have been tasked with the subject of juvenile justice. I don't know if you're aware of this, but Wyoming has been the number 2 state in terms of the rate of juveniles incarcerated for a number of years. It's behind only South Dakota. And this is all data that was current as of 2011. Wow. South Dakota has implemented some kind of changes. I have to interject that. Yeah. Although I don't know whether they have taken effect. They've been trying to reform their system. And that's a lot of kids behind bars.
Yeah. Now, behind bars for what reason, though? I mean, is there a legitimate reason that they are behind bars, or we just have a bad system that's putting all these kids behind bars?
That's a very good question. And I'm afraid some of this is a qualitative value judgment. Mm-hmm. We are the only state in the union that has not decriminalized status offenses. A status offense is an offense committed by a juvenile that for an adult would be completely legal. An example would be having a tin of chewing tobacco. You can actually have a felonious conviction in the state of Wyoming for possession of tobacco.
Well, okay. Now, for a possession of tobacco, would put a kid in jail or a fine or probation, or what would that do to him?
All of the above.
Wow.
We have a number of kids that are incarcerated for tobacco possession. There is a very interesting video called Your Neighbor's Child, put out by the Annie E. Casey Foundation, that I viewed early in the exploration of this subject around early 2012, end of 11. And I was stunned by their portrayal of the situation in Wyoming. And unfortunately, although they tended to over-dramatize and take a more softer perspective than I do, I think, I have found most of the information in the video to have been quite accurate. Although at this time, what I must say is that the statistics on Wyoming are, because we're such a small state, it doesn't take very many kids in 1 or 2 counties to skew all the statistics.
Right. Okay.
And what we actually have is a number of counties which are the focus of all the juvenile arrest and incarceration. And the rest of the county, there's a number of counties that have incredibly low rates. And this is not portrayed by the statistics, which tend to just concentrate on the entire state.
Right.
And it's unfortunate because the entire state of Wyoming gets sort of blacklisted for this, when in reality it's just about 4 or 5 counties.
Well, there's a lot of numbers like that in the state of Wyoming that get skewed. Like, for example, Wyoming has more on-the-job workplace accidents than anybody else. But then when you take a look at what the population tends to do percentage-wise. So many people work outdoors in very hard jobs, wherein you might go to another state where pretty much everybody is inside in an office. So it makes us look a whole lot worse. So, okay, in the state of Wyoming, though, would you still say, despite that percentage that you were just talking about, that kids are being treated unfairly, wrongly? Maybe there's just a better way to do it. How would you classify it?
I think there's a better way to do it.
Okay.
I think that's probably the most accurate summation. I think that that juvenile programs need to be much more community-based rather than statewide, because as Byron Otakoven of Wascop said to me, something that works in Dubois or Mountain Home isn't going to work in Cheyenne or Laramie. And I toy with the idea that possibly there should be 3 separate sort of templates for, and what I am interested in more than anything else is pre-adjudication or pre-trouble diversion, true diversion, not some kind of thing that happens after the kid has had contact with law enforcement and the judicial system, but actually keeping the kid from having any contact. And to quote a doctor whose name I can't remember, but he's some famous heart doctor, a heart attack that does not occur lacks a certain amount of drama, and that sort of program is difficult to get funded. Okay, now funding a program. Here comes the hard part. This might be a hard part for you. Funding the program to do what instead of punishment? What would you have them do instead? As Granny said, idle hands are the devil's workplace. And every study that I have read indicates that juveniles who are engaged in extracurricular activities, that would be sports, 4-H, shop classes, working at a job, do not get in as much trouble. The other problem with juveniles is because it's looking like, because of the way their brains develop, if they can't actually see their place in the community and in the world in the next, ideally, at least 6 months. And some of these kids can't even see where they're going to be in 1 month. And that leads to a lot of negative behavior. There was a great study by Columbia University recently, not on juveniles because they can't sign a waiver. They started with kids that were 18 to 24, and they found that the desire or the ability to rationalize very negative antisocial behavior was directly related to the kid or the subject's ability to perceive their place in life in 6 months, a year, 5 years.
I would even wonder that in the old days of Wyoming, since we're talking Wyoming here, kids were put into a position of responsibility early on. Because somebody had to take care of the farm, somebody had to take care of the ranch, or the family simply wasn't going to survive. And so from the moment they got up in the morning until they flopped into bed and passed out at the end of the day, it was nonstop work. And there's just simply a lot of free time on their hands, which would mean not really a good sense of purpose for somebody's life. So to find something of purpose, and hopefully, I would think, but tell me if I'm wrong, work related, so they develop work ethics.
I am also an employer. I am a federally permitted outfitter on the Shoshone National Forest and the Teton Wilderness. And I would really like to see more of a work ethic in the younger generation that applies for a job with me. And I think you are onto something there.
So let's get back now then to the court system then. How do we change that? So legislatively, but
you can do anything you want legislatively, but whether anything happens or not is another question. Gingrich signed a very interesting sort of juvenile rehashing, most of which hasn't been implemented. But as he signed it, he said, I'll sign anything you guys put in front of me. So I believe it was in 2011. I've seen it on video. I was not there. I was not actually on this sort of thing then. But whether you can implement it or not, I don't know. As an example, currently there's a bill in front of the Judicial Interim Committee to require the judges that are making custody decisions to weigh the idea of full joint custody where the child is living with both parents sort of intermittently going back and forth over a week or two period. And I was at the Judicial Interim Committee meeting, I believe in April this year, and 3 judges testified that they actually are weighing that as a possibility already when they make a decision. And they suggested that probably didn't need to be put into law. And as it is put into law, I don't think it's going to change anything. The other thing that we have going on in Wyoming that is a frequent target from outside the state is that we don't really have any juvenile court system. And that would take a lot of money, which we don't really have to put into it. We have a very large land mass. I think that the system needs to be much more grassroots and much more community-based.
Right. Well, and I would think that, I know they do have some discretion, but a little more discretion and maybe training for the judges as to what the options would be.
Yes, and the judges that I've spoken to are interested in it. But I think another part of the issue that is sort of a nationwide problem at this point, and this is borne out by a number of interviews that I've had with law enforcement personnel all over the country, is that people are calling the LEOs, the law enforcement officers, over things that the cops don't have a toolbox that is equipped to deal with teenagers that are in hormonal, emotional turmoil.
Yeah.
And it is really unfair to expect them to do so.
Well, that also brings us back into a different world, because when you go back to the old days of the old sheriff out in the West,
yes,
the sheriff had great discretion, usually knew the kids, usually knew the parents, could deal with it in that way. These days, an officer shows up and he's got to do what the law tells him to do.
And that, this is really kicking a big can of worms.
Yeah.
But I live in a small town. I live in Du Bois, and I obviously know all the deputies. And these guys generally can spot a kid, they have told me, between the ages of 7 and 10 that they're going to be seeing at 12 or 13. They know years in advance. And you are correct. They are not given the discretion to do very much. There is currently a tool available that has recently been reapproved by WASCOP called the JDRA, the Juvenile Detention Risk Assessment Tool. And it's a very short questionnaire to decide whether a kid needs to be detained or not.
Right.
And that's going to go a long way when it is fully implemented statewide. It's been legislated supposedly for all juvenile contact a number of years ago, but as of the last report from DFS, it was only being administered to about 13 to 16% of the kids that were actually arrested in the state.
Okay, that's something I want to talk about with you next, because we have an advantage in being in a small state area like we do with small towns, that we can take care of things in ways that the big cities would never be able to take care of. So let's talk about that next. So back in we go with Mr.
Tom Rose.
Tom Rose, and he is with
the Republic Free Choice Organization.
Yeah, Republic Free Choice is part of Wyoming Liberty Group.
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean,
that's okay.
I can't quite tell.
Yeah, but Republic of Free Choice, I've seen the website out there as well.
Yes.
So
I know when I log into my Republic Free Choice email, I go through the server that's Wyoming Liberty Group.
Okay. So
there must be some kind
There's got to be some kind of connection.
Yes.
So, okay, we have for those people, the affiliate stations, radio stations that are listening to the show out west, nothing but small towns out here. In fact, some of the towns that are out here, I kind of laugh and I say, that's not a town, that's a neighborhood out in the middle of nowhere. So small.
If even that, I mean, look at Powder River.
Yeah. So when you look at these tiny little places, there is an advantage. You were just saying that the local police officers can take a look at a young man, a young girl, and say, well, they might be only like 10 years old now, but I can tell that I'm going to have to deal with them by the time they're in their mid to late teens or so. With that kind of an advantage, we have an advantage that the cities don't have. If those officers can have some kind of community discretion.
I think that even the larger cities in Wyoming, which aren't really large, the officers probably have a really good idea very early. I mean, their entire world is being on the street and observing, and they are trained observers. There's been a lot of discussion about a juvenile data collection to try to figure out what sort of recidivism we're running. And obviously there's huge issues with privacy and trying to expunge records. There's another bill currently for record expungement, another one that's not going to work based on the way our system works. But I have been thinking about it for a while. I ride down the trail on a horse and I think about these things. I drive somewhere and I think. And I think the guys that really know these things are the officers with 10, 15 years experience, because they've watched these kids and they know where they are now. I was thinking about, I used to own a retail store, and I was thinking about, I had a young lady, 2 young ladies actually, that came in and shoplifted a bolt of cloth. And I didn't actually know it was missing until a sheriff's deputy, who's currently now a police chief, wonderful Leo, came and said, "Is this yours?" And I looked at it and I said, "Well, yeah, except I think mine's on the shelf in the, in the back room." He said, "Well, why don't you go look?" And sure enough, he was right. And this is an anecdotal example because I was trying to remember where these girls were now, because I live in a small town. And I believe one of them is leading a productive life, or would probably be judged as, that's a value judgment on my part. But I think the other one is currently on probation, I believe, for some kind of drug or alcohol offense. And these young ladies at the time, it's hard for me to judge the age of kids, but I don't think they were 10 at the time. And obviously one of them straightened out and the other one didn't. So as a population, we need to look at that. One of the things that's funny about the juvenile justice system, not funny, haha, is that we are dealing with a transient population. And when you think of transient population, people think of homeless people. And the idea is that, they're sort of moving through, they're not actually sticking anywhere. And to a certain degree, that is an apt summation of the situation with juveniles, because many of them, when they are incarcerated, by the time they are actually released, they are over 18, or they're about to be 18. And at that point, they become adults. So there's your transients. I mean, you've only got a really short period of time where the stats are generally that kids are 16 or older before they're sentenced, although it is oddly enough going down, and has been for the last 3 years. We're getting younger and younger kids being sentenced nationwide. Although nationally, on a whole, juvenile crime is on the downhill slope. But I don't think I couldn't necessarily tell you for sure, but it's been going downhill since 2006.
We got about less than a minute left here. So where do they go to find stories that you're writing about and maybe even work with you on solving some of these problems?
So I'm blogging on republicfreechoice.org. The comment section has just been updated, so you can leave me a comment directly on the site. There's some kind of a login process, but you don't have to have a Facebook account. You can be completely anonymous. If you want to leave me comments, comments on, what I do with my hair, or what I should be eating, that's fine too. Death threats, any of that.
Death threats are,
all of that's appropriate.
Good. Okay. Thank you for coming
But if you would send me alfalfa, my horses would like that.
Okay. So send alfalfa.
Send alfalfa. Ideally, send alfalfa.
So thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.